This is Dan Schneider. On this Dan Schneider video interview, the subject is actors on acting. I have Nan Lynn Nelson on, and she will be talking about her career and the art of acting. This is another Actors on Acting interview. My guest is Nan Lynn Nelson. She is an American actress. Earlier today, I recorded a show with her about one of the shows that she appeared in many years ago. We'll briefly touch upon that, but this will be more about her overall career and the art and craft of acting. So welcome, Nan. We talked a little, in the first interview, you talked a little bit about yourself, but we'll cover that as we go and talk about your youth here, because we want to dig a little bit more into your creative side. And from what I was looking up in the interim between the shows, you've also written a few books as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on too. So welcome. And so you would probably have been born, you're probably a handful of years older than me. What is your earliest memory of acting, of seeing someone on screen, seeing someone on the television screen? And do you come from an artistic family?
Oh, wow. That's such a good question, Dan. First of all, thank you again for having me and having this conversation. Um, it's so weird because it's something that I just always felt I could do, that I was before I think I even realized what it was to be an actor. Um, but it was something I knew was in me. And I don't even know why or how, because growing up, we did have a television, black and white TV, when I was really little, because yes, you're right, I am a handful and then some older than you. But we did have a TV. Um, and I just remember the very first memory of an actor on TV that had a real impact on me, that I was able to identify as that's the thing that I'm feeling that I can do, was, I would have to say, Diane Carroll
Mm,
on her show Julia.
yeah.
Um, and just having a real visceral response to that, because she did, she was a brown skinned person, woman, and she was playing a nurse, and my mom was a nurse. And so it was just this, immediate identification with her. And it just sort of helped me, kind of opened up what that mystery, that feeling that I was having about this ability to be other people, to act, if you will. And so that's really my earliest memory. Although growing up in church, we had Easter Sunday recitals. My brother and I were always up in the front with our little recitations to say. And I loved that feeling, being in front of a bunch of people and having them look at me and while I was saying words. My mom always made sure that we were very articulate and very loud, to make sure that we could be heard and seen. Um, but yeah, in terms of a artistic background, my dad was a musician. He played the saxophone, but I didn't know anyone who performed as an actor or dancer or anything like that in my family. Yeah,
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Harlem, USA, Harlem, New
Mm,
York. Yeah, 129th Street between Fifth and Lenox.
mm. Um,
Mhm.
so I want to talk first a little bit about the creative urge in you, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some other early roles for black actors and how they may have affected you. Um, when do you consider yourself first as an actor? I know, for example, a lot of artists, and to a certain degree, in certain ways, I'll say myself, I'm a writer first. You can say I'm white, or I'm a male, or I'm a human being, but primarily, if I was abducted by aliens and they said, "What are you?" I'd say, "Well, I'm an artist. I'm a writer." Is the artist part of you the deepest part of you?
I would have to say yes, because to me, that creative energy is so spiritual. It transcends race and gender and economics and all of that. I believe the creative energy is it's an innate virtue that we all have, whether we call ourselves artists or not. I think that virtue of the Almighty Creator that's in all of us. So yes, I would say I'm a spiritual being, and part of my spirituality is my creativity, my artistry, for sure. And then everything else is piled on, once we come into this plane of existence, right? Once we come onto this physical earth, then everything else gets piled up on us as our identities, so to speak.
So I don't know if you had any siblings, but growing up with any siblings or friends your age, did you find yourself looking at things in a different way than they did? For example, if you visited, an uncle and aunt out in New Jersey, in a more rural part of New Jersey, did you look and say, "Oh, I've never seen a frog before"? Or did you approach things in a different way? Did you feel different, even though people around you would say she's just one of the kids?
Yeah, I did actually. And I remember I have a very early memory. Well, if you really want to know something, my earliest memory, Dan, honestly, is being born. And I know that sounds really weird, but I swear I remember it. And when I told my mother that memory, she couldn't believe it. But I said, Mom, I remember being one place and coming into another place. And the very first face I saw was the doctor delivering me, because
Mm.
she did natural childbirth. And it was the face of an Asian man. And I remember the eyes, I remember the glasses, and the doctor who delivered me was Filipino,
Hmm.
very Asian looking. And I said, I don't know how I know that, but that's what I remember. Anyway, so that's like my very first memory. Um, in terms of being different, yeah, I guess so. In retrospect, right? Of course, when you're that young, you just think everybody thinks that way, everybody feels that way. But I remember when I would meet people, and if I heard a particular accent, right, I would think, oh my goodness, why do you speak that way? Show me how to do that. Why are you talking like that? I remember I met a little Jamaican girl when I was growing up, and she just had the most beautiful lilt in her voice. It was almost like she was singing. And I just thought, wow, you sound so pretty. And then going to the South and hearing the way my cousins speak in Charleston, South Carolina. I don't know if you're familiar with that dialect, but there's a dialect that it's mostly African Americans have in Charleston in particular, not the whole state of South Carolina. Some people call it a Geechee accent, but it has kind of a lilt to it. It's reminiscent to a kind of Caribbean kind of
Is it
accent.
sort of
And
like
I
Gullah? Is it sort of like Gullah?
kind of like that. It kind of goes in and out and up and down
Mm.
and sort of like that. And,
Mm.
and I
Yeah.
would think, I wish I could talk like that. And I never knew I had an accent, right? Growing up in New York, right? It's like, no, New Yorkers don't have accents. We talk normal. We talk like regular people. You guys in the South and Jersey, you guys have the accents, right? No, until I went to school in the South, when I was told, like every time I opened my mouth, that I was from New York. Oh, where are you from? You from New York? You're from New York? I was like, how do you know I'm from New York? I'm just talking to you. And they were like, yeah, you have an accent. So yeah, I think I thought differently from early on.
I know I live in Texas, and for many years I've had Texans that they go, "Boy, you from Hungary? What? Hungary?"
I'm
You know?
hungry. Wow. I've never.
but but so when do you have? I know we briefly touched upon it earlier. Do you have like a memory of like a particular performance aside from Diane Carroll in the show? Maybe like the first time you saw The Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland. Do you have a memory of saying, "Oh, I wish, or I was there," or you know, I could be a better Munchkin, you know, as a kid than the Munchkin that you saw?
First of all, I have such a fond memory of The Wizard of Oz, as most of us do at that age. And it's just one of my all-time favorites for so many reasons. But I always just thought, and I remember sharing with a friend of mine, I said, I'm a really good actress at the time. I use the word actress, and I still use the word actress. I don't know if it's politically correct or not, but I still use the word actress. And I said, I don't even know why. I don't even know how. And not that I compared myself with other people, but I just felt like I could do that. What she's doing, I could do it. Not better or worse, but just that's something I could do. And I remember, I don't know if you remember the show called Get Christy Love.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Get
That,
Christy Love. That's another one. But yeah, like the Wizard of Oz, we would watch that every year that it came on. I think it was one of those annual shows. And in fact, my brother and I have this adventure. Oh, here's an interesting story. When we moved from Harlem to the South Bronx, we were still going to the same church that we went to in Harlem on 135th Street, 132nd Street. And so my mother wanted to make sure that we were still able to get to that church. We were 3 train stops away from the South Bronx to Harlem. And so we made it to the church okay that morning for Sunday school. But coming back home, we got terribly lost. We took the wrong train. My brother was 10 and I was 8. So we were little kids navigating the subway system. And I remember we ended up way downtown, Brooklyn Bridge. And the only thing I had on my mind was The Wizard of Oz was coming on at 8 o'clock that night. And I kept telling my brother, we better be home by the time The Wizard of Oz comes on. Otherwise, I am going to be so mad at you, right? So we're getting on the train and off the train. It's getting dark. We're jumping turnstiles because now we've run out of our little money that we had for candy afterwards. And we end up back in the Bronx, but still we're lost. And back then they had these police phones that you could like go to the corner and pick up, and it would be a policeman would automatically be on the phone. And I remember my brother picked up the phone and he says, "Can you come and get us? We're lost." And I said, "You have to tell him where we are." And he said, "Well, we're on whatever street that was." So anyway, we finally get home. And of course, my mother's hysterical. The whole family's there. And I said, "What time is it? Is The Wizard of Oz on?" And we made it home just in time to watch The Wizard of Oz. And I was just so happy, but I never felt afraid. I never felt like, oh my God, I'm never going to see my parents again. I was just like, my brother was the older brother. And it's like, listen, time's running out. Can't miss The Wizard of Oz. So that's my little Wizard of Oz story.
yeah. Well, just so you know, I grew up in the Brooklyn Queens border. On the Queens side was a very Goodfellas-like environment. On the other side, the Brooklyn side, which was Ridgewood and Wyckoff Avenue, but it was very much like if you saw the old photos of the South Bronx in the '70s, there were black and Hispanic kids. So we would play across the border, but it's like almost a Berlin Wall. So I was very familiar with black culture. I mean, I remember Diane Carroll, the heterosexual in me remembers her. And I remember Good Times, the sister Thelma, and I also remember when Diana Ross in the early mid '70s, what was it, Mahogany? That was a big movie. I remember going to see that.
Yeah.
But that brings me back to I want to talk when you were growing up. Probably the only actor of African American descent that would have been known would have been Sidney Poitier. There weren't really any black actresses of any stature. So when you turned on television, uh, aside from maybe like a small role as a bartender or something, the world that was portrayed on television and even in films, other than Portier, was an almost lily white world. Um,
Mhm.
so, as you're looking at that, is there some kind of cognitive dissonance that goes on in your mind? Is like, where are people like me? Because a lot of people say, well, oh, now you're being woke or politically correct. But if you are whatever you might be, gay, Jewish, black, Native American, and whatnot, and there's a world in which there's nothing that physically at least resembles you. How does that affect you?
That's a great question. When you're a child, you're just innocent, right? And so growing up, seeing only white people, you're just not even conscious that that's what's happening
Mm.
until you do see a black person, right? So growing up, watching Ozzie and Harriet, Donna Reed, Patty Duke, Gidget, all those shows. I mean, I just loved watching them. Marcus Welby. And to me, they were just people. They were just people that I was watching. I wasn't looking really at them as white people. And I wasn't thinking, where are the black people? Because I just assumed that's the way it is. All the black people I knew were in my house and in my neighborhood and at the social events that I went to. And I figured, oh, this is the world. The white people are on TV, black people are here in my house. And I enjoyed the performances. It's a Wonderful Life, again, is one of my all-time favorite movies, still is to this day. Um, but it wasn't until, I don't know if it was the late 60s, early 70s, when you did start to see black people. And I tell you, the very first time a black person showed up, and I don't know, it might have been Diane Carroll, it might have been somebody else, but it was a shock. And that's when the light bulb goes off. That's when you go, huh, I never noticed that I never noticed that before,
Mm.
right? Until you actually see them. And then that's when you called everybody into the living room. If you saw a black person on a commercial or in a TV show, there were some Westerns that had black people in it, like, a minor character. There was a Twilight Zone that had some black people in it.
Mm.
And you would go, oh, there's a black person. Star Trek always had a black person in it, right? And I know the joke is whenever you saw a black person in Star Trek going to, one of these planets, you knew that was going to be the person that wasn't going to make it back to the Enterprise, right? It's like, he's there, he's not there, but okay, you got to start somewhere. But yeah, and it wasn't until much later and then I think that's when it started fueling me that I could really have a career doing this. Like I said, it was something I always felt, but I also had a love for science and biology in particular, and thought about being a doctor when I was really young. And I loved reading books about medicine and science and Madame Curie. And one of my favorite childhood books was Conquest of Disease. And I remember I took that book out twice in my school library because it was like, no, I'm going to be a doctor. But I was having this dual conflict with myself, this conversation about be a doctor, no, be an actor, be a doctor, be an actor. But being an actress won out. But yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing about race and racism in America. It's so subliminal, and it hits you in very different ways. And there is a certain kind of cognitive dissonance that you kind of almost have to have in order to survive, and to negotiate what is before you, and what the W.E.B. Du Bois talks about that dual reality, right, that Black people experience. It's the one where we are in the outer society with people, and then the one where the outer society isn't with us in our homes, in our social circles. And it's ever present. It's ever present, race and racism in America. It's part of the fabric of this country. It's part of what makes this country what it is, and it's part of what makes, Black people who they are and white people who they are. This whole social construct of race.
So let's talk though about the female side. Did you find any difficulties trying to get into the business, not only just because of the color of your skin, but because of your sex?
It was mostly the skin, the race aspect. Because if that was going to be first and foremost, right? If they wanted a female for a particular role, it was going to be a white female. It would have to be very specific Black female if that was what the character was going to be, right?
Mhm.
So race sort of always came first in that regard. And it's very interesting, very early on, the description was always something like a Black, female, age, that kind of thing. And those parts were, not as readily available as, just general female roles. But, my agent sent me out. I, booked what I could book and, did very well. But they were few and far between. And the fact that they were few and far between, that meant every talented Black actor, actress, in your category was there, for that audition. So, it was stacked against you in that way. And the fact that, they didn't come along that often.
Yeah. That brings up the subject of like colorblind casting, because it's one thing if the script says back let's say 50, 60, young Negro male, or young Black female, 17 to 20 or whatnot. But nowadays, a lot of people will get up in arms. I think it's a girl named Halle Bailey, not Halle Berry, but Halle Bailey, who was, I think she was the one cast as the Little Mermaid, or was it Halle?
Oh, the new, yes, I don't know her name, but uh-huh.
Yeah, and so people are up in arms, and I'm like, okay, it's one thing if you were trying to cast a Black female as Winston Churchill, but it's a goddamn cartoon, you know. What is
Right.
your take on this current kind of? Because it seems to me that what the silliness is, like I said, if you have Winston Churchill or you have Genghis Khan, John Wayne played Genghis Khan terribly in a movie. It, it, there you have to be a bit more fidel to reality. But when you're talking about, if you cast a Black person be Batman or Superman or the Little Mermaid or the Jolly Green Giant, for example,
Mhm.
what does it matter? Yet you'll see, pardon my French, a lot of white people losing their shit over this stuff that's ridiculous. It's like this isn't Shakespeare. It's not like it's some great role to play the Little Mermaid. It's just another bit of entertainment. It's not like you're arguing about Hamlet or something. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, again, that's the reality that we find ourselves in. That's the impact of race and racism in America. And that's the indoctrination that we have all been subjected to. And white people, it seems, want to take ownership of things that have been, I guess, portrayed predominantly in, even the original Little Mermaid. I guess, she was a mermaid, but she had red hair and white skin, right? And I think that it's hard for white people in particular to be able to separate themselves from that kind of ownership because they've always been in the position of writing the narrative, and when someone comes along and rewrites the narrative and puts a different face, a different gender, onto a character that they, had become accustomed to. And yeah, you're right. I'm talking like animated characters, fictitious characters, cartoons. I think it does something to their cognitive dissonance. It upsets their, their reality, their identity. We get very attached to these things. But I think it's part of the growing pains of realizing that we live in a diverse world and a diverse society. And it's not saying that one is better than the other. It's art, and art really goes across the color line. But like you said, if it's an actual historical character, you do want to stay true to that, as much as possible, and cast someone who is of that ilk, who can portray, an African American, a Native American, or what have you.
So,
There.
just to get back to your family, were you sort of like the class clown or the family ham? When the family would gather, would you get up on the table and do a little song? Would you have to be the center of attention?
Not really. I was definitely not the class clown. Definitely not the class clown. But whenever I got together with my cousins, we would always put on a show, right? When it was a family gathering, family dinner, holiday, or whatever. And I honestly was the one who organized it. It was like, oh, let's, we always memorized songs, right? The 45s, the Supremes, the Four Tops, so we might do like the little girl group and sing a song like that in front of family and have fun. But in school, honestly, I was a very shy person. I did do school plays in elementary school. Um, but I was, and still am, relatively speaking, a shy person. But definitely not the class clown.
Um, I want to talk more about the craft of acting, but I do want to go on one other sort of political tangent because in the last few years, getting back to the female side rather than the racial aspect, there was the Me Too movement, and Harvey Weinstein and a number of other people, Kevin Spacey and whatnot, have fallen from their perches due to allegations and in some cases proof beyond a reasonable doubt of guilt in terms of sexual abuse. And I bring this up simply because I saw that you did an episode of The Cosby Show, and unfortunately, Bill Cosby is in that ilk with the Spaceys and the Weinsteins. So I'm just wondering, and you don't have to get into any details, what were you ever, when you did whatever role you did there, were you ever aware of his predilections?
No comment.
Okay. This is a question that I've asked a number of people, Nan, a number of actors. You're probably the 31st or 32nd actor in this series. When you act, are you trying to get away from Nan, or are you trying to be the most Nan that you can be?
That's interesting. I am trying. I'm just trying to be connected to the emotion, the emotionality of the character that I'm portraying. And that is involuntarily brings me along somewhere along the line. I'm not thinking I am being Nan or not being Nan. I'm thinking I'm tapping into my emotional resources, my intuition, my reality, and the creativity of who this person is that I'm portraying, my imagination. Um, so, this being the instrument, my body, my face, everything being the instrument of what I use as an actor, that just sort of comes along. That's part of it. That's the physical part of it. Um, I don't try, like I said, I don't try to put myself in or situate myself to be or not to be. Pardon the Shakespearean. But just to try and be as honest as I can with the emotional makeup of the character that I'm playing and be in those moments that I'm playing with other actors on stage or screen.
Um, so when you draw, if you were had a role as, say, a mother whose child has died, or husband has died, or a woman who's been sexually assaulted or something, you don't have to do the Robert De Niro thing where you research it, because you use the word imagination, and this is one of the things that I find very frustrating about art in general in recent years. It's a lot of people, art. I'm trying to express something about myself or whatnot, but imagination is there. You know, if you were cast as some kind of creature from another planet, well, you have to use your imagination, because if you're going to have a costume where you've got 4 extra arms, you know, what's it like to have, you know, 6 arms or something? So, to what degree do you think that imagination plays in your art, and do you think that imagination is somehow been left behind in a lot of the other arts because it's almost more confessional rather than what the mind can do?
I mean, whether people are saying they're using their imaginations or not, I think it's an integral part of being an artist. I mean, you know, being an artist means you're using your imagination. Creativity means you're using your imagination. Of course, you're using your life experience as well. And if there's a role that takes place during a particular time, or a character that has an experience that I know nothing about, and I need to find out, you know, what was it like back then? What would, you know, that person be thinking or doing, or what, you know, kind of economic background would she be coming from? You know, I might do something like that. But I think the imagination is all a part of it. None of it is separate. You know, you have to, you know, I wouldn't say that I do a whole lot of research for things, but as an actor, but I do study the character. I do try and understand what the character would be going through. And that's all part of imagining that, right? Um, so, you know, for people to think that, you know, that they're not using their imaginations, I don't know what else they're using. They're using their minds, unless they're just playing themselves. You know, I think it's just, you know, an integral part of any kind of artistic expression.
So, another word that often I find uh, it's kind of sketchy when artists use it is honesty, and uh, that's because part of art comes from the same root as artifice. You are not you're not. I mean, we're creating a world. If you're telling a story, you're creating a character that maybe didn't exist, or is a historical figure so far in the past, whether it's a caveman or Napoleon, or someone that you can't really know what they are, because life has changed so much since they existed. So when you talk about honesty, are you talking about a fidelity to the fictive character, uh, or what in what sense do you mean honesty?
Yeah, in terms of the truthfulness that's coming from like your gut, from your soul, when you're portraying them, that you are honestly believing in the words that you're speaking. It's honesty. I know it's almost like an oxymoron, right? Because you're being honest in this imaginary world,
Yeah.
right? So you've got honesty and fiction sort of interacting together. It doesn't mean that you can't be honest, right? In that moment that you're working right now on stage. You know, when you're working in the theater, you're on a stage. You're not in a living room for real. You're not really on that set was created for you to create this world with your character. But that doesn't negate the fact that there's authenticity that you're bringing to the character, that there's honesty that you're bringing to the character. I mean, those are all levels of the craft, I think, of acting. Being able to portray and really have an authentic moment in an imaginary world, space, story. It's how we play, right? We play in that imaginary world, but what makes it artistic is that we make it feel real. And that's the honesty, making it feel real to our audience, whether we're on stage or in a film. That's the craft of it, and the artistry. This discipline, it involves so many different layers. It's not flat. It's multi-dimensional. And that, Dan, that you hit on, that's one of the dimensions, the honesty within imaginary worlds.
So, as an actor, you're a performing artist. You're also an interpretive artist. Someone who writes a symphony or a pop song, someone who writes a play or a poem or a novel. That's more creative in the sense, it's more totally creative, 100% relying on creativity, because if I write a novel, I can destroy worlds and universes or whatnot. But you're given a character, and you're given lines, and you've got your director that says, okay, in this scene, your character is going to feel this way, that way, because of A, B, and C, whatever it might be. So you have a narrow restriction. You're interpreting another person's vision, if you will. To what degree do you feel a need sometimes to put your own spin on something? And if again, if you have the restriction of the director saying, well, no, Nan, you did that wrong. Yeah, I need a little bit more in this area or something. How are there more frustrations as an interpretive artist than as someone who is the creator of the character, or are you a co-creator at your best?
Yeah, there could be. Yeah, I do like to think of myself as a co-creator, as an actress, and I really like to trust my director. Right, I like to trust that they're being objective. That if they're saying do it this way instead of the way you're doing it, unless I just have a visceral response of, "Ooh, wow, I don't feel that at all." I will do it. I will try and please both the playwright and the director. Again, this is part of the craft, right? This is part of the interpretation of it. And yes, it's a more narrow space than a writer or a painter, because it's collaborative, right? When you're an actor, it's usually a collaborative effort between the person who wrote it and the person who's directing it and yourself. So you come with what you come with. You bring your interpretation, and hopefully the director will like it, or might want to tweak it a little bit, might want to throw something at you as a little twist. I know as a director, I do some directing. Sometimes I ask the actors to play totally against what is being written on the page, right? Just to kind of get them out of something I feel like they might be locked in, right? And open up something different inside of them. And sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't, but it's all part of the rehearsal process and the playing together and the working together. But you always want to, be authentic, do, respect the playwright, respect the director, but to also be true to yourself as well.
So, are you one of those actors that prefers the stage? You see that as the most genuine form of acting. It's obviously the oldest one, and you're there sort of like a trapeze artist. Then you could fall or lose a grip on it much more easily than if you're doing 27 takes on a television or film set. What is your view versus those different types of acting for
I
different
must
media?
I must confess, Dan, the theater is my heart. That to me, I'm not saying it's better or worse, but that to me is where the nuts and bolts of an actor is. That's where that gives you that gives you the foundation really to go from the stage to film to television. It's such a discipline that you have to have because, yeah, once you walk out on that stage, there's no retakes, right, until the next performance. So you really have to um, have your mind so focused on what you're doing because it is live and the energy is completely different when you're a stage actor because not only are you getting the energy from your fellow actors and the lights and the sets and all that, but it's reciprocity that you're getting that energy from your audience as well. They're part of the whole theatrical experience. Even though they're sitting there, they're definitely a part of the theater experience. It becomes like an instant community, I always say. The audience, they're the instant community right there. You know, all of these people coming from diverse backgrounds, sitting together, having this theatrical experience. But it's really a communal and community that's being experience that's being developed right there before our eyes. And then we get to have the bounty of them telling us how much they loved it at the end, for the curtain call. And there's just nothing like that feeling after you have laid your soul bare before them to get that instant gratification from a live audience. So yeah.
One of the actors that I interviewed gave an anecdote about Jason Robards, that when he was in college, he went to see Robards in a play, and he went backstage to, just speak for a few moments to Robards, and he was gushing about how good Robards was, and Robards basically said, well, did you notice that in whatever part of the play that, I fucked up and whatnot? And the younger actor who I later interviewed was like, no, I didn't notice that. And Robards basically went on that when you're on the stage, you have to, even if you screw up, you know, uh, you have to keep going. And the reality is, sometimes and most times, the fact that the audience isn't going to notice that it's a screw up unless you let them know it by your reaction to it. So, what is your take on that kind of an observation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely true. I mean, you can either forget a line or some technical thing happens. Um, I remember when I was doing open admissions and I was to turn on a light and I went to turn the light on and it didn't come on, right? So I clicked it again and then the light came on and then I just threw a line in there and I said, this sometime lamp. And then I kept on going, right? Because it was obvious that the light didn't come on. Um, and either you ad lib or you just keep going. And no matter what, I think there's something in you. There's like this what do you call it? This foolproof thing that happens, right? When you're on stage and something doesn't go right. Um, Here's something that happened when I replaced Angela Bassett in Joe Turner's Come and Gone on Broadway. And when you replace someone in a Broadway show, you don't get the long rehearsal time that the cast gets. And when you replace someone on Broadway in a show like this that has already toured the country, and now they're coming to Broadway to do their Broadway debut, they have been working together for months, if not at least a year. So when I replaced Angela Bassett, I had 1 week to rehearse with the understudies, not even the cast that I was going to be working with on stage. And I had a fitting for my wardrobe and I got it all fitted and everything. And then at the last minute, the wardrobe woman handed me the undergarment, which was like a crinoline skirt, right? Because this was a period piece. Joe Turner's Come and Gone. I don't know if you are familiar with
That's
that.
August Wilson, right?
August Wilson, yeah, one of my favorite August Wilson plays. And so, and first of all, so I had like a week of rehearsal without the regular cast. The day I was going on, the regular cast met up and we rehearsed that afternoon. My first time ever working with them, meeting them. So that evening, I'm just like, you know, panicked, scared to death. And I never noticed how loud the crinoline slip was underneath the skirt until I walked out on stage. And all of a sudden I hear, I'm like, oh my God, that's me. And it sounded so loud. And I just thought, but I got to keep going. You know, the audience, I'm sure, can hear it. Everybody can hear it. I guess this is what Angela wore. I don't know. But it just had, it was like I was walking on potato chips every step I took. But I kept going, you know. And when these like things like come at you, you just have to keep going. When I did Runaways, I had a live pigeon is in one of my little scenes. And the pigeon actually did its little business right there on the stage while I was holding it, not on me, but on the stage. And I remember I said, I don't know what I said to it, but you know, I had to acknowledge it, right? So I acknowledged it and somehow like, you know, did you do that or something like that? And at the end of that monologue, I let it go. But that's why there's nothing like live theater.
Yeah.
Nothing like it. You don't want these things to happen, but when they happen, they just add to your stamina. They add to your foundation as an actor.
So if you're doing voice work, you don't appear on screen. If you're doing television or film, it might be a close up on your face or you know a you know mid body shot or something. But when you're on stage, uh, you have to sort of act, you know, with everything. You know, you just can't have yet a hand hanging down by the side there if you're doing, you know, there's got to be something going. Does that tire you or energize you more? And are you aware? Does does your I does your brain as an actor sort of extend to your fingertips and more when you're acting on stage?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, your whole body is there the moment you walk out on stage, whether you're speaking or not. If you're in the background, sitting, you know, at the upstage dining table, and there's a major scene going on downstage in front of you, you are still on that stage. You are still a part of that scene, and you have been directed to do whatever it is you're doing. So you can never drop out of the scene. You know, you can never, you know, look to see if anybody's looking at you in the audience, you know. You are that character through and through 100%, whether you have a line or not. You have to hold it down and be that character 100%.
I've often said to younger writers that when you're writing characters, it's less important to describe what the character looks like, unless it's something like the Elephant Man, obviously. But it's more important to get behind the character. You're going to reveal the character by what they see. And I've always said that character is plot. No one's going to give a damn about the Pequod if we don't care about the characters. You know, people don't read Moby Dick for the damn whale, really. I mean, and so applying that to an acting sense, how do you inhabit a character? Do you look at the little tics the character might have? Do you try to create a backstory if, let's say, the character doesn't have one readily available or explicated by whatever the medium, whatever the production is? How do you best co-create that character, even if it's just, you know, woman in the background laughing on a date or something?
Exactly. Backstory. Yeah, when I'm teaching my students, my young people, yeah, write an autobiography of your character, whether it's in the play or not. If it's in the play, use what's in the script, but add some depth to it. What are your hobbies? What foods do you like? What's your secret? What makes you afraid? What makes you happy? Just to get them off of just this one-dimensional experience of the character, and hopefully give them some depth to go down into. And I would do the same for myself, to really think about this character, what makes her hurt, what makes her happy, what makes her angry. Even if I just jot it down quickly, and just kind of think about it. But I think it serves the character, it serves the play, and it serves the artist well to do those kinds of things, so that it's not just someone, a body standing there reciting words that they've memorized. There's depth, there's history behind it.
So do you teach acting privately, or is it at like a university setting?
Well, I've taught acting. I've been a teaching artist for quite a number of years, over 15 years. When I lived in Poughkeepsie, New York, I did a lot of teaching with middle school students and some high school students, and writing with them, and having them do their own productions. But definitely, yeah, teaching young people. And I find that the arts. There was a huge study years ago. I can't recall it right now. That did a lot of intense research on the transformational impact and power that the arts have on students in terms of their academic achievements, and their confidence, and their self-confidence, and their ability to interact, and the discipline of it all, particularly the performing arts. And I find that to be absolutely true, because I will work with students who some people might deem to be troublemakers, or aren't very smart, or a waste of time. Those are my students. Those are the kinds of students that I really like working with, because I know none of what is being said about them is true. Um, and the arts always bring out their genius, their creativity, and they turn into completely different people, especially when you get them on stage. Oh my goodness, you can't get them off. And it's such a rewarding experience. I mean, I've been on Broadway and TV and all of that, but my most rewarding work, I will tell you, Dan, is working with young people using the arts, theater, music, literature, writing, movement. That is where the payoff is for me.
So how do you judge a character, or a script that you get sent by an agent, or whatever other way it might arrive to you? And does that change over the years? For example, if you were when you were 25 or 30, and if you had been, say, I don't know, if Spike Lee or someone had a role for you and it required nudity, would you be more apt to do that now, or then, rather than now, because you, we don't see old people. Old people don't have sex anymore. They're not interested in it, if you believe Hollywood. Um,
I know
and
you're not calling me old, Dan. I know you're not doing that.
no, you're a very attractive woman. but I'm talking about the way that Hollywood views things. Everything's in a box. Everyone's got to be what. I guess maybe the only thing that Hollywood can agree on, whether race or sex, that everyone has to be hot. Everyone's young and beautiful. People who are overweight, or people who are short, or people who have big noses, whether regardless whether they're Puerto Rican, Black, Hispanic, whatever. They don't exist in the world. Everyone's beautiful in Hollywood.
Right, right. And it's such a shame, especially for young people, because they feel like they have to achieve that. They have to be that. And, I know you've read the stories of these young girls who, they become anorexic. They, are having nose jobs and boob jobs
Yeah.
and, all of this stuff to try and be, this narrative that has been put before them. And this is Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, they're all trying to be this ideal that's been put before them. But I think now some of these younger people, like in their late 20s, they're starting to, I think, embrace who they are, embrace their bodies, embrace their own beauty, that they're not so much comparing themselves, because when you live your life comparing yourself to other people, you're already starting at a deficit. You're never going to win that race because you feel like you're already less than, and it's only going to get worse, as opposed to just embracing and seeing the beauty that you already are, whatever that standard is. And I know in America, we have this standard of beauty. And believe me, as an actor, you're totally faced with it, because it is about the physicality to a certain degree. But I think as a younger actor, yeah, I don't know if I ever would have done a nude role, but I probably would have thought about it, right? Like, oh,
Well, would
Spike
it
Lee.
depend on the director? If it's a
Yeah,
director that you respect, I mean, it's one thing if you're slasher victim number 7, and you're
right,
just
right.
anonymous and you're just on to show your breasts for 10 seconds.
That's right.
And but if it's something like let's say if it was some psychological thing exploring race in America, and some Klansmen were to abuse you in 1960s Alabama, that might have more resonance than it's just
Exactly. As
Chucky
opposed
the
to
Killing
to
Doll.
exactly. It really would depend on the content. And I mean, even to this day, like you're saying, if it depends on the content, if it's making a point, if it's demonstrating, something, and it's not just gratuitous and showing, nudity for nudity's sake. But that's something that you would have to kind of think about in the moment, if it were to come up.
And have there been roles that you've taken that you took simply because you're an actor and you needed the money, and that you're saying like, if you hadn't been in that position, you would have turned it down, but you just had to take it at that time.
Actually, no. I remember I auditioned for a play once, and it was about these teenage serial killer girls. And I remember reading the play, and I was sort of midway in my career. I might have been like, and I always played much younger. So I went up for this role, and I read the play, but there was no point to it. There was nothing redeeming about these girls. There was, they didn't learn any lessons. And I remember I turned it down, and I said, I just don't want to be a part of this. Like, these girls just went and killed like old people or something.
Mhm.
And I thought, why would somebody write a play like this without it, having something some commentary about why these girls were the way they were, what happened to them, what made them that way. It was just this sort of, frolicky, oh, let's just go kill some old people, from what I remember. But I remember I did turn that down, and that was at an off-Broadway theater. And I just thought, sorry, I can't do that.
Yeah, well, that seems to be in the last, well, since the turn of the century, I guess. Darkness seems to be thought of as complex. What I mean by dark, psychologically dark, that they remake something from the 40s or the 50s. It might have been a lighthearted comedy, but now the dad is a serial killer, or Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck is now crazed and killing some. Everything has. And the superhero movies are probably the worst current example. Is that you get, and it's just violence, and like I said, you can do violence. I mean, violence has a place. Violence it has a reality, and you can portray that. But
Right.
if you're just showing, all of a sudden Superman, who for 80 years stood for goodness and wanted, Superman destroys some world just because Lois
Right.
Lane was in danger or something, and that doesn't make him more complex. I've always thought the more interesting characters are the characters that are good, because you have to struggle to be good. It's very easy to give into your dark side. You want to be Ted Bundy, you want to be Adolf Hitler, you want to be, fill in the despot or
Right.
psychopath of the moment. But the person who has to think and has to step back and say, do I do this or do I do that? And if I do this or that, what will happen? That's the more complex character. And I'm not saying you have to be a goody two shoes good person, but to me, goodness is fundamentally more complex. What is your take on that?
I totally agree. I think, we have gotten caught up in the last couple of years, the last decade at least, in sensationalism. The gorier, the better, the darker, the better, the more it'll sell tickets. It just becomes, a marketing ploy. I am not a horror fan. I'm not a fan of horror movies, that genre. I know that there's, for certain things, and I'm sure there's some that are very artistically done. I feel like it gets into my soul. It vexes me, so to speak. And I just don't like it being in my consciousness. Even when I watch TV, today, I always just cover my eyes. When I hear music, when I know something is about to happen, I just cover my eyes, because it's like I just don't want it entering into my consciousness, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Um, but
Well, but there's also a difference between horror, true horror that gets into you, and simply slashing and bodies. I mean, you can be scared shitless and not have the gratuitous violence. If you're talking about something, someone, you're playing a character that witnessed something tragic as a child. Maybe their father was killed in an accident and they saw it or whatnot, and how that plays out in that person's mind can be slowly building horror. But that
mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go slashing all the neighbors and killing everyone.
Right, right, right. And I love a good thriller, right? I love a good thriller. I love suspense. I love things leading to something that I'm not quite sure what it's going to be. It fills me with a little trepidation. But to me, if the story is written well, if the characters are believable, I'm there. I love a good thriller, drama, movie, TV series, so yeah, but the gratuitous slashing, and I like Hitchcock, because you didn't really see much blood and stuff, but he let your imagination kind of take you
Well, in
there.
the famous Psycho scene, you don't see any real blood. You just see the ink going down as blood,
Down
but
the
you
drain,
never see her getting actually stabbed. You just see the slash of the thing, and
silhouette.
you can fill it in your mind. You don't necessarily have to, see, Norman Bates rip off her breast or something.
Right, right, right.
Um, I want to talk about what makes a good piece of fiction or film or a stage. Um, it's been attributed to many people, but the story I've heard it most attributed to is the director John Huston, who said that a good movie has 5 or 6 great scenes, and then the rest, you can just link up filler. But I've always thought that oftentimes the best scenes where actors are acting aren't in those scenes that are obviously Oscar bait or Emmy bait. The character has just had a high point. Maybe it's an emotional high point. Maybe he's confronted the bad guy. Maybe this, that, or the other thing. But now you're in the linking scene, and the person, the lead character, is at the bar, maybe having a drink, recovering from whatever, and they have a small scene with a minor character. To me, those are the sort of little, what I call interstitial moments, the little moments between the big scenes where an actor really earns their pay. Do you agree with that, generally speaking?
Well, I think, a good story is all about character first. As human beings, we want to relate to the characters in the stories that we're watching, right? We want to relate to them on an emotional level. We want to be able to feel something for them, either empathy, or we want to, you know, either root for them or hope that they don't achieve what they're going for if it's something we feel may be negative. But it always starts with character. So if you give me a good character, I'm going to be with that character through thick and thin. So if they have a big moment, if they start out with the, what's called the inciting incident, right, in a story, a screenplay or whatever, then that's sort of telling me something about who they are, what their stakes are, and all of that. And then to see them in a less impactful, intense scene, and we're talking movies, it just adds to who that character is. How are they relating to this other smaller character in the movie, the bartender, the waitress? It all tells the story of who the character is, whether it's in a big scene or a little scene, but it's an added layer. It's another layer of who they are, and another depth of emotions that they're bringing to the screen.
In the early interview we did today about the Hot Hero Sandwich Show, you had mentioned that comedy wasn't the thing that you initially, it wasn't the thing you were initially drawn to. What is your take on comedy versus drama? Because oftentimes people will say, well, comedy is harder to do. It's harder to get someone to laugh than to cry. But other people, like Woody Allen famously said, drama is like sitting at the grown-ups table. What is your take on comedy versus drama? Do you prefer one to the other? Is it just whether it's a good comedy or a good drama, or bad in both cases?
Hmm. Um, the symbol for theater is tragedy and comedy, right? They are so intertwined in the entertainment and storytelling experience. For me personally, it's easier for me to do drama, because it's all emotion. It's I feel like I have more resources to bring on the dramatic aspect of a character. I do think that comedy is probably harder because you're dealing with timing, you're dealing with maybe body language, you're dealing with, vocalizations. It's so nuanced in a different way that drama is. Um, and like some people are just naturally funny. Their delivery is just naturally, it makes you laugh. And not everybody has that. I guess you can develop it. If you want to play, a more comedic role, you can kind of develop, that style, and be that person. Um, but and I don't know, I would say my preference would be drama, but I wouldn't shy away from a comedic role. I'd take it on as a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, some people, like I saw a couple of weeks ago a 1982 PBS production with Gabe Kaplan as Groucho Marx, and even as an imitator of Groucho Marx, you just lift an eyebrow in the Groucho Marx role, you can get someone laughing just in reaction. Um, uh, Let me just talk a little bit about the different types. We mentioned stage drama and whatnot. Have you done commercials, and have you done like for video games or cartoon voices? And what is that acting like versus when you're actually there in the flesh?
Right. Yeah, I've done lots of commercials. That's been, any New Yorker will tell you, any New York actor will tell you that's your bread and butter, right? Because you depend on residuals and all of that to get you through the next major gig that you get. So commercials are great. I love it when I booked a national commercial. It could pay for like a whole year, 2 years of your life,
Mm.
in residuals. And I was very blessed in that regard. Voiceovers, I do live voiceovers actually for events,
Mm,
gala events, announcers,
mm,
it's called GOD, no, VOG, Voice of God.
ah.
That's what they call the live announcer. It's like, well, who's the VOG? Who's the VOG?
So
Um,
if you that would be like if it's at some show in Monte Carlo, you'd be like, and now Halle Berry's in the raspberry colored dress with her latest boyfriend.
That's right. That's right. You're announcing them. You're thanking them. You're, giving information to the audience. So I do that, and I've done voiceovers for commercials as well. And it's a different aspect of acting. It's voice acting because now all you have is your voice, and you have to convey certain feelings and emotions with just your voice now. So you have to kind of uh, think differently in your mind to kind of make that happen. um and so it's all part of your toolbox, so to speak, as a performing artist, as an actor. Your body is your instrument, whether it's just your voice or just your body, or the combination of both.
What are the sacrifices that you've made to be an actor or an artist in general? And if you weren't an actor, what would you be?
Ah, well, like I said earlier, I was, going back and forth with, being a doctor and being an actor. But probably at a certain point, if I didn't go to medical school, I probably would have been a teacher, um, uh, maybe elementary school or high school teacher. Um, but I don't know, sacrifice. Hmm. Being a parent and being in show business. Um, I actually, we moved up to Poughkeepsie, New York after a while because the kids were getting older, and I just thought, got to make a decision here. And I was getting older too, right? This time doesn't stop. So, every step along the way of this life's journey, you always had to kind of stop and reassess, where you were. You go from being the ingenue to the auntie, and then the mother. And then, you just have to sort of reinvent yourself along the way. And then the roles also shift in every new level that you reach as an actor, more or less in this category or that category. So at one point, I just, when I moved up to Poughkeepsie with my family and became a teaching artist, I remember, calling my agent and saying, please don't send me up for any auditions right now because I'm working with students. And if I book something, I cannot leave them. I cannot leave them if it's like opening night and I gotta, do a commercial. So I don't even want to step into that arena. When school is over, I'll let you know, and then, you can send me out. But I just felt like there's no way I'm going to work with these kids and then get a job and say, see you later,
Mm.
you know. Um, so, is that a sacrifice? I don't know. It was a choice that I made, and I felt like it was a good choice. It was the right choice for me to make. And like I said, that to me is the glory. That's the reward, working with young people.
Well, that's a good segue to talk about some adjacent things that you've done to acting. I'll get to a couple of the books you wrote in a moment, but I'm looking on a website called tvguide.com, speaking of what we mentioned earlier, and it gives some highlights of your life here. I don't know if you've ever seen this page, so maybe
Oh, yeah.
you can correct the record if they've got it wrong. But
What is
if, for,
tvguide.com?
yeah, it says founded the Arts Education Performance Academy in 1979. Did you do that?
1979?
1979. Yeah. Made her
I
broad. It says made your Broadway debut in '79 in Runaways, bringing to life the role of Nikki K. Kane. So what?
That's true.
Okay, so the first one was wrong.
The first
So
one, I started the Performing Arts Academy in Poughkeepsie, right? But it never evolved into the big thing that I wanted it to be,
uh
because I kept getting hired as the teaching artist, and so I kind of used that to be my academy,
mhm.
right? But that was not in 1979. My goodness, that was not until the 90s.
Okay.
So I don't know where they got 1979, but I did do Runaways. Yeah.
And what was that? Was that like wasn't there a famous movie about 20 years ago about runaway kids? Was that something similar? Like a
No, this was the Runaways, the musical by Elizabeth Swados.
okay.
And we started at the Public Theater, and it was an original piece that it was a collaboration between Elizabeth Swados and the actors who were part of this ensemble cast. And again, like Hot Hero Sandwich, there were real teenagers, and then there were the sort of older kids in our 20s playing teenagers.
Hmm.
And we all sort of created these characters, and it was like 6 months of workshopping this piece with Joe Papp in the Public Theater,
Oh,
and then it became an off-Broadway show at the Public. Got wonderful reviews, and then it was Chorus Line was the big show from the Public Theater, and then we went on Broadway with Runaways, and we were on Broadway for almost 2 years.
yeah. I remember when you mentioned Joe Papp, I was thinking he was involved in the musicals because I didn't he? I mean, he did in the '70s. He did something. I don't. Was he also involved in what was the one with the uh, the
Chorus Line.
well, I'm sorry.
Chorus Line?
Yeah, but didn't he also do other musicals? Like, didn't he do the one with the giant plant that tried to eat people, or was it the Demon Barber, Fleet Street?
Oh. I don't know if that was, I
No.
don't know if that was a Public Theater.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, what was the name of that? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It turned it, there was a movie
Yeah, it
and
was
everything.
Jack Nicholson starred in the low budget movie, and they made a musical out of it. But so number three, it says playwright finalist in the Susan Smith Blackburn International Women's Playwriting Contest in London for Leaving Watermain. So you wrote a play. What was that about, Leaving Watermain?
Leaving Watermain. Oh my goodness. I just so happened to have this right here, Leaving Watermain, Leaving Watermain.
Oh,
Yeah, this was a play that I wrote, oh boy, yeah, about 25 years ago or so, and entered it into that contest, which is a very prestigious contest, and was a finalist. And I got to go to London and receive a certificate for it. And I've had lots of celebrity readings of this play, and I am so happy to say that next fall, 2023, the Charlotte Conservatory Theater is going to finally do a full production of Leaving Watermain. And
hmm.
I'm just really thrilled about it. It's one of my most favorite plays that I've written.
Is that Charlotte,
Uh,
North Carolina?
Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I live
Oh,
right now.
okay.
And yeah, so I did this 2 week stint in Raleigh, North Carolina, and worked on Leaving Watermain there. I've worked on Leaving Watermain with the theater in New Jersey. Oh my goodness, it'll come to me in a minute. And
Children's
also with
Media Project?
no,
No.
Children's Media. That's a company in Poughkeepsie, New
Okay.
York. But at the Actors Studio, I'm a playwright with the Actors Studio in New York, and developed it further there. Part of the Genesis project in New Jersey. Gosh, I can't. The name of the theater is not coming to me. It'll come to me in a minute. So I've been developing this play for a while, and it's always been a hit. It's always had standing ovations And so now I am in negotiations with it being produced in next fall. I'm very happy about that.
It also says that you worked for Harry Belafonte, although they misspelled Belafonte's last name. His company, Harbell Productions, as a story editor. So you worked for Harry Belafonte?
I did. I did work for Harry Belafonte. That was exciting. That was in the 90s. I started out as just sort of an office person, script development, did a lot of reading. I had worked for New Line Cinema prior to that, reading scripts and analyzing scripts. And then I got this job with Joanne Moore as the development person there. And yeah, it was a wonderful experience. Really cut my teeth on screenwriting during that whole time between New Line and Harbell, and really being able to make a distinction between screenplays and stage plays, and got really quite good at it, I would say. So that was fun. That was some good learning, some good growing period for me as an artist and as a writer. Yeah, it was wonderful.
It also says here that you were a student of Omega Theater for the Omega Transpersonal Drama Therapy. Is this like using acting as a way for people to get over traumatic stuff?
Absolutely. Using theater as therapy. Yes, drama therapy. I have a certificate of completion of a whole years of study at the Transpersonal Theater up in Boston. Because, like I said, as you're growing through life, you reach these certain stages. And I found out I didn't even know that there was such a thing as drama therapy. But when I heard that, it was like, it makes so much sense. And so I studied that for a year, and then I incorporated that with when I work with students and really help them to dig deep into their characters. Not that we're doing therapy, but it helps them to get more in touch with who they are and to build their confidence. And so, yeah, that was a very worthwhile use of my time going through that. And it's a real legit profession. There are drama therapists. It's a certification that you get. It's a license that you get. Insurance will pay for it if you are connected to the insurance company. So it's a very viable profession.
So what is this like for youngsters that might have been going through a war trauma or
It
sexual
could be for
abuse?
anybody. It could be used for anybody in any kind of trauma. It could be, just therapy that you need if you feel like you're stuck with something. For young people, for adults, it's just a different way of approaching personal issues that I find that it's something that really can help unblock certain things, because there's role reversal, there's role playing. And when you can be a little more objective, you can maybe see things a little clearer.
So
Mm.
so uh, you also wrote, at least from what I can see, at least two books. It looks like you wrote a children's book, Girl with the Giggling Hair, and then you also wrote a book, that's the one that's on Amazon, How to Get Paid: Interviewing with Style. So that's quite a different thing, a children's book and interviewing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, well, that's true. The girl with the giggling hair. This is the girl with the giggling hair. And this story, I started writing this when my daughter, who's now 40, was like this girl's age. She was 10.
uh,
And I remember, washing her hair, and it was very bouncy, and it had all of this bounce to it. And, we talked about race earlier. Hair and image and beauty and all of that, has such an impact on young African American girls. And I wanted to find a way to make her, feel good about her hair and her skin and all of that. And I remember I said to her, I said, look, your hair is laughing, it's giggling. And then I thought, oh, I'm going to write a book called The Girl with the Giggling Hair. So, I had sent different iterations of it to different publishers, and got back, oh, nice, but, not for us. Good luck, blah, blah, blah. So I said, I'm just going to publish it myself, which I did. And I went to Outskirts Press and got this published. And I love it. I think it's just a really fun book, and it's about not just this girl and her specialness, but about the specialness in all of us, that we all have something special that might seem different, that might, seem unordinary, but it's to help children sort of find their specialness, their uniqueness, and to celebrate it. So that's The Girl with the Giggling Hair. My first children's book, however, is called, I don't know if they have that there, Journey to Virtue Planet. Do they have that one?
The only one on Amazon. Amazon only has, from what I can see when I Google your name here or look up your name, How to Get Paid. The Girl with the Giggling Hair is on Outskirts Press. There, so let's see. Does it have? Let me see if I.
And well, this is Outskirts Press too. It's got beautiful illustrations by a friend, John Watson, who does like amazing illustrations. And this, again, it's about finding your inner virtues and letting them be your guide in life. Things like love and self-discipline and excellence and justice, modesty, determination, respect, creativity is one of them. So we go through a whole journey with this book, and I created it's a program, actually. It's multiple parts to this program. This is just one part of the program that I created called Journey Virtue Planet. And I had fun doing it. I use it with my elementary school students when I'm working in elementary schools, and we have them sort of recite different things, and it's a lot of fun. But the one that you're talking about that's there is called How to Get Paid, Interviewing with Style.
Yeah.
And this was as a result of working with my high school students, right? And feeling like, these kids are not prepared. They're not prepared for going out into the real world to interview for jobs, So it's a basic kind of preparing yourself for the workforce, for going and presenting your best self, and everything from your hygiene to the way you speak, to your handshake, and your follow through, your due diligence, all of that. Because I just felt like, what can I do? What can I do to prepare and help these kids that I work with every day? And I see that they're going to struggle. They're going to struggle in this world to have the impact that I know they can have. So that's why I wrote this how to. And this is now on Amazon, but I wrote this through the now defunct. I published it through the now defunct, which was part of Amazon.
Kindle.
What was it? Create Space.
Okay.
Create Space, yeah.
So I want to talk in the next segment that we do about some of your roles, both on stage and not. But before we do, I just want to turn backwards to a couple of things that you said here, and I don't want to talk about it simply because you're a Black woman and you're an expert on all things Black. I hate when people, oh, I've got the Black person here. Let's talk about Black issues.
Right.
But you brought up about the Girl with the Giggling Hair, and that brought to my mind the idea about colorism. And we talked about just white society and how it deals with people of color or from African, and it got me thinking about, because I mentioned Halle Berry earlier in the thing in this interview, and she, oftentimes you'll see when she's the star of a show, she's often like a shade or two lighter in the posters than she is in real life. You're probably midway between the darkest dark and a very a light colored one, and then there's the straightening of the hair so it looks more European or whatnot. Have you ever been asked to lighten your skin or to straighten your hair for a role, and what was your take on that?
No, I've never been asked to do that. But early on in my career, there and colorism is such a real thing. As a matter of fact, that plays a very significant role in my play Leaving Watermain, within the family, right?
Mhm.
Um, but when you go up for these Black roles, right, there's every shade from, very fair Black woman to very dark Black woman, my complexion or darker. And in the early days of my career, whenever I would walk into a room and I would see, this array of, these beautiful Black women, I would think, okay, well, I know where this is going to go, right? And it usually would go to the lighter skinned woman,
Mhm.
right? And I could get down to the callback. I could get down to it's between you and this person, and 9 times out of 10, it was always the lighter skinned actress who got the role, unless it was a role that was like nurse,
Uh-huh.
a service type person, right? A service
Someone that
type
the white hero wouldn't have a sexual fantasy about, say.
would, or someone that has no sexuality at all.
Yeah.
She's just the person of service,
Mm.
or it was the prostitute or the maid,
Yeah.
right? Um, so then I thought, well, I probably have a good chance to get one of those roles. But it plays such a big a part in who got hired and who didn't. And I remember I was up against an actress. She's a fabulous actress, and it was for a major motion picture. And when it was over, the director came over to me, and it was almost like he was apologizing, but I could read between the lines, right? And he came over to me and he said, Nan, I just want you to know, I think you're fabulous. I think you're a wonderful, wonderful actress. And that to me is the kiss of death,
Mm.
right? When they tell you how wonderful you are, they're saying, but.
Yeah, it's like when a woman says to a man, "Let's be friends."
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I left there going, okay, I didn't get that one. And I didn't, and it did go to a lighter skinned actress. And, that's changing a little bit now. You kind of see darker skinned women playing maybe the romantic lead in certain roles now, maybe a few. I'm past that, period of my career and that age,
Mhm.
but I'm happy to see that it is sort of, happening a little bit more. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and like during the soap time, that is one time I must say that I did beat out a light skinned actor for that role.
Yeah.
I got the role of Vivian Roxbury Barnes,
Now,
and
but was that because the character, the daughter character, was that because she was darker and you looked more like her mother? Or no?
no, she was actually light.
Yeah.
She was actually an actor of mixed race.
Yeah, I looked
Um,
it up in between show. Ingrid Rogers was her name, I think.
oh, that sounds familiar.
But
That
what?
sounds Yeah, I can't recall.
Okay.
But so, you would assume that maybe her father was white,
Yeah.
right? If I was her mother.
Yeah.
But I do, yeah, that I just thought about that. And this was a wonderful actress too. And so I was really surprised that I got the role. But I guess that, they wanted, I don't know if they wanted to make a point or whatever, but you don't ask these questions, you just say thank you and arrive on time.
But is it if it's changing? Is that because that uh, there are more black producers behind the scenes that are greenlighting projects with darker skinned characters, or is it because the white culture in Hollywood has changed? Because Hollywood might want to portray itself as liberal as compared to a Trumper, but that doesn't mean that they're really open minded.
Right. Absolutely. I think it's definitely a combination of both.
Mm.
you know, yes, we have, you know,
We have
Rhonda,
Tyler Perry, people like
yeah,
that.
Tyler Perry, Rhonda,
Yeah, Shonda Rhimes. Are you talking
oh,
about?
yeah, Shonda Rhimes. I was getting my S and R's mixed up. Shonda Rhimes and yeah, Tyler Perry and you know, lots of these young people that are coming up and they're just making the movies themselves. And now with things like Netflix and Amazon and just YouTube and people becoming stars, just producing their own work. And then Hollywood seeing, oh, there's some viability here. There's some, you know, we can market this. Oh, people excuse me, are attracted to this person because you know it's always about the bottom line, which is money. Because they used to say that you know black movies just don't make money until you know the big black exploitation films came
Yeah.
around and those movies made a lot of money. Um, and then it sort of kind of went backwards afterwards. But yeah, I think these young people are you know they have a strong voice and a strong point of view, and they're not taking no for an answer, and they're grabbing their iPhones and their friends. They're you know learning to edit. They're learning the behind the scenes um, mechanics that have to happen in order to produce things themselves. You know, what's his name, Jordan Peele. You know, young people like that. I mean, I know he's not young, super young, but you know, they're doing it themselves, and I think it's wonderful.
So before we talk about your roles here, I just one final thing. So we've talked about racism in general. We talked about colors, and we talked about the sexuality and uh, women in Hollywood. Um, because you're now, I guess I don't want to say, but maybe you're just cruising into the senior area. Uh, do you find that ageism is a big factor too in the work you get or don't get? And
Mhm.
you know, I've just it's another one of those things that I'm 57. It's like you know, if I were an actor, you know, when you why would I want to be cast with a woman 25 years younger? I mean, that's not going to happen in real life. So if you want to do a real drama, why not have a couple of 60, 65-year-olds, you know, maybe one's a widower, a divorcee, and they get together. I mean, what is your take on as an aging actor that is ageism as big a problem as these other things we've talked about?
I definitely think it's an element to it, which is why you know I have sort of turned most of my creative energy and juices into writing, and have been writing more than acting. Being here in Charlotte, I find that you know there's a very vibrant theater community here in Charlotte. Lots of wonderful actors here, um, and you know I would think now do I really want to put myself through it, you know, do I really want to audition for this? And then I think you know what I love writing plays and creating characters that you know maybe I'll step into something that I've written maybe, but you know before leaving New York though it definitely was playing a role in it because you know like you said, in commercials in particular, they would cast a man 57, 60, and have a wife that looks like she could be his daughter,
Or
you know,
granddaughter?
the granddaughter, exactly. And you would go, what, you know, what are they trying to say here? I mean, come on. But never the other way around, mind you. You know, it's never the older woman with the younger husband, you
Or
know.
if it was, they're called a cougar, you know, a
Yes,
predator.
a predator cougar, exactly. So again, you know, these are the people who are writing the general narrative and throwing identity on folks and telling them, you know, this is how you should live, how you should think and breathe. The media is so powerful. I often say it can change the world overnight if it marketed kindness and equity and justice the way they market toothpaste and soap powder and hatred. If they really made that a commodity, if they made kindness a commodity, I think people would follow that like they follow everything else that they see before them in the media, TV, film, magazines, whatever. It's a very powerful medium. It's so subliminal. Um, and it affects our minds. It affects the way we treat each other in the world. It's very powerful.
Nan, let's talk about some of your roles, both on stage and on screen. Obviously, we can refer people back to the show we did earlier about your work on Hot Hero Sandwich, and you also mentioned 321 Contact. And I'm looking on IMDb and also another one called the Movie Database, and uh, it looks like you did a Kate and Alley. We won't
Mhm.
mention the couple of Cosby shows. And we have, I find you did something in 1997 called White Lies, and your character was called Buppy Wife. I guess black urban professional wife. Yeah. Now,
What lies?
yeah, White Lies. Now, this is a IMDb is not necessarily always correct, so maybe it's not something you did.
I don't recall that. I played a Buffy wife, huh?
Yeah, that's what it says. Uh, then you did a TV movie, and we have TV movies gone, called Clover.
Oh
You,
yeah, I did Clover. I remember that. I think that was in North Carolina, as a matter of fact, years ago. With Ernie Hudson. Was Ernie
okay,
Hudson?
yeah, from Ghostbusters.
Yeah, uh-huh. Clover, do and what else is there? Innocent Victim? No. Was it Innocent Victim?
Let me just see what it says here. Clover, was this for one of the major networks here? It
I
says
believe so.
1997, not rated. Sarah marries Gayton, a single father who's African American. Again, not long after they married, Gayton dies, so Sarah has to take care of Gayton's daughter, Clover. Okay. Hmm. So were you the mother that died? Or?
I don't think so. I think it was a supporting role, I remember. And I did have a scene with Ernie. And was Loretta Devine in that? Was that the one I did with Loretta Devine? I can't remember. It was a few of those. Yeah, but that's true. That is definitely true.
You had a role on a TV show called DC. Was it just one episode?
DC. I
I'm a,
don't think accurate.
no, okay. Uh, then you did something called, it looks like 2014 Cultural Wars, Monica's Auntie.
That sounds familiar. Cultural Wars. What year was that?
It says 2014. Let's see what it says here. Monica's Auntie. Let's see. IMDb. It's coming up. Okay, Cultural Wars 2014. As Bob Khalifa Siwa tells his family that he's in a relationship with Monica Raquel Heslip, his father tries to persuade him to leave her. His friends, mother, sister, and brothers do not know what to do to help him out of this drama.
Was that an episode of Law and Order, maybe?
Well, it says Cultural Wars.
I think they might be listing the titles of
Okay.
some of the Law and Order episodes that I did, because I did
Okay.
quite a few of those.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I see them listed. Then you did something. Jack of the Red Hearts played Lillian.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Is that Janet Grillo directed that?
Let's see. It says. And there's some way you're listed as Lynn with just one N, others with two.
That was early on in my career. I think I might have added the Lynn, because Lynn is my middle name.
Okay. So Anna Sophia Robb, Famke Janssen is in it. Let's see. Jack of the Red Hearts, directed. Oh yeah, Janet Grillo. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So were there any of these roles? Did they bring back any anecdotes or memories that stick with you?
Um, well, it was all of the Law and Order. And oh, I think that's that Cultural Wars. I'm pretty sure that was Law and what is it? Law and Order
Yeah.
series episode, because I played an expert in it was about female genitalia, uh, circumcision. And I played an expert on the witness stand about the trauma of that. I was Dr. Somebody, playing that role. Um, and it was really interesting because I don't think I knew anything about that at that time, what that was. And that was really interesting. And the thing I really liked about working on the set of Law and Order is the diversity of the crew. It was very rare to work on a crew that had, black grips, and like in my early career, the crew was always, white. The makeup people were always white. As a matter of fact, Hot Hero Sandwich, here's a little something. They did not have makeup for me and Jarrett when we got to the set. Uh, they had to go and buy makeup for us. And that's when they had the Negro number one, Negro number two, Negro number three from is it Bobby Brown? Bobby Brown, not this, not
Yeah.
Whitney Houston. I think that was her line of makeup, but that's how it was numbered. I think I was Negro number 4. I think that was.
Well, that's like with the bandages used to be flesh colored, but they'd be pinkish.
That's right. That's right. So, but yeah, I think that's what that was. The Culture Wars, Law and Order on that one.
It looks like in 2018 you did something called The Bread Factory, directed by Patrick Wang with Time Daly.
Yeah, I did that upstate New York. It was really nice working with Time Daly. She was just wonderful, and Patrick Wang. I think it's on Netflix or Amazon now. Yeah, the what was it called? The
Bread Factory.
Bread Factory. Yeah, lovely group of actors. Had a really wonderful time working with them, and working with Patrick Wang, and would love to work with him again. And like I said, time was great.
So the last one that I see as far as TV or films, and then we'll talk about the stage stuff, is something called Unintended 2019. You played a doctor named Paula Steiner.
Yeah, that was an interesting movie. It was just a relatively small role, but it was with the lead character, and the director was really nice. It was a woman director. Again, this was upstate New York, and it was a really nice crew of people, and I got to take her blood pressure, and we had a nice little scene together. Um, and I went to the premiere of the movie, of both those movies. The thing about Patrick's movie, it was this kind of eclectic story of this community that Tyne and Elizabeth, I can't remember the actress who played her co-star, in this small community upstate New York, trying to save this community center. And he had a scene where people broke into song and dance, and it was just really interesting. It's a very interesting piece.
So you said earlier that stage is your first love in acting. What's the most memorable role that you had? Either the one that you thought you were the best at, or the one that meant the most to you, or if you wanted, if they're different, which one?
I would say, starting out with Runaways, because that was my first really major professional theatrical experience. The time that we took to create it, to co-create it with the director Elizabeth Swados. I actually created the name Nikki K. Kane. Um, and it was the hardest though physically, because it was movement, it was singing, people were losing their voices, like every week someone was losing their voice and other people had to step in for them because they just nothing was coming out. Folks were getting, shin splints, and all kinds of things were happening because it was, a lot of physical stuff going on. um, and it was hard because it was not like once you walked out on stage, it was nonstop for a lot of us.
Mm.
um, and it took a lot out of us. um, but that really, helped me hone my skills in the theater, to be able to go through that whole period, and it got nominated for several Tony Awards. um, I think, I mentioned, the Joe Turner's Come and Gone bit. That was my scariest because I felt like I didn't feel as prepared as I wanted to be in terms of the rehearsal process. I mean, I knew my lines, but it was just so. I actually debated leaving the theater before I walked out on stage. I was just saying to myself, you could just walk out right now and just give up your career. This could be the day you never act again. Just leave the theater. But something compelled me not to do that. And again, once I walked on and got over the crinoline making all that noise, I what I had to do. And then open admissions, um, that was probably my most dramatic role. That was crying. It was very therapeutic actually, because I had to sob every night and every performance in that piece. And I really loved doing that. It just felt very cleansing, if you will, to do that. And I worked with Kevin Ty and can't remember the young African American actor who's wonderful in that as well. Yeah, so they each had different aspects of an experience for me that just sort of helped cultivate, who I am as an actor to this day, with the strengths and the discipline that I have.
We briefly mentioned earlier about cross-cultural casting. So have you ever like done any like Greek drama or Shakespeare? And if so, was it cross-cultural or was it like with a totally like black or minority theater group?
Yeah, I the only Shakespeare I did was in college when I studied theater in college, and that's the only Shakespeare that I did where I had to memorize lines and stuff. Um, and it was very straightforward. It was just Shakespearean. But I did write a play that I sort of model, like I call it a uh, urban African tragedy, and it's a play in poetry and prose and music, and it kind of has that sort of Shakespearean element to it with a chorus, and then the main characters that speak in spoken word, so to speak. But yeah, Shakespeare, I really admire. I love the language, but I never had the opportunity really to do a Shakespearean piece. It would be fun to do, I think.
So of all these roles uh, in whatever medium, is there a particular one that stands out as the one that you're the most proud of? And even if so, is there a role that you would like to do, in your lifetime? If there's a current role or the type of role that hasn't been written yet.
That's interesting. Um, well, I think one of my favorite roles, I think, would have to be the Bloodhound Gang, honestly, because it was using theater to teach science to young people. And I cannot tell you how many people, grown people, who have come up to me throughout the years, and people still do come up to me. Someone came up to me last year here in Charlotte. This man had gray hair and told me he watched this show when he was a kid. So I was like, oh my goodness. But they come up to me and they tell me they studied science because of the Bloodhound Gang. They went into medicine because of me in the Bloodhound Gang. And that just makes me feel wonderful. I'm proud to have been that spark, that inspiration, that introduction to that subject matter to young people. And back in the day, I would get fan mail from people who shared that as well. So I think that probably that was the most impactful role. It's a show that ran the longest. Um, and, but I think, hmm, going back to Hot Hero Sandwich again, I think they should bring that show back, and I would love to be the parent in the scenarios in that show. I really think that show has light right now. The whole format, the whole setup, to talk about these issues, these social issues today. It's a wonderful way to have these conversations. The arts are just, they're medicine, they're healing. They reach people in a way that other things can't. And like I said, creativity has a spiritual component to it, and I consider myself a spiritual person. I'm a member of the Baha'i faith, and I feel like spirit, the ultimate creator, we're all on this earth to do good, to do good. I think we're all born with goodness in us, and somehow we get into this physical plane, and we get traumatized by different incidences in our lives. This becomes our life's journey, and some of us can recuperate, and some of us can't, unfortunately. But it's all here for our growth and development, to share, to learn, to serve humanity. And so, if I, am blessed enough to, as long as I'm here on this earth, I will give my heart and soul to my art, with my own children, my grandchildren, and any other human being that I come in contact with, because I think it really is such a healing um, um, art form, and can just it's transformative. It really is.
So you mentioned Baha'i. Are you familiar with the poetry of Robert Hayden?
Yes. As a matter of fact, somebody just did a thing on Robert Hayden.
Because he was one of the 3 or 4 best black poets in the American 20th century, and he was a Baha'i.
Yes, yes, yes. I just saw a presentation a couple of months ago, actually, it was earlier this year, on Robert Hayden and his poetry. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's another show. I won't go into it, but just a few more questions, and then we'll end it up. Have you ever had any problems with, or have you ever known any actors who dealt with typecasting, and what is your way to work around that?
Um, well, I mean, yeah, I think we all get typecast, like I was saying earlier, I would only go up for black woman, certain age, until they started changing it. And what they started doing is they started seeing everybody for woman role, right? So if it's woman between, 30 and 40, I think it was something that was changed in the union, that you have to see everybody. You can't just say, well, woman or white woman. Usually, if it said woman, that meant white woman. You can't just break it down like that. You have to see everybody. And they started doing that, but then you started realizing, this is just political,
Mm.
because even though they're seeing everybody, they already know they're not going to hire anybody except the white female actor for this role. But it did give you an opportunity to be in front of a casting director that you may not have had the opportunity to be in front of for maybe some future role. That's how I thought of it.
Yeah, that's in pro football. They had a thing called the Rooney Rule, which minority candidates had to be interviewed, but they would interview them but not hire them to be the head
Right.
coaches. But uh, since you mentioned the union, I just want to briefly ask you about that. And this is more for younger actors. What is your take on the state of the union? Because you're both AFTRA or not ACTRA. Uh,
SAG,
yeah,
SAG, AFTRA, and then there's equity.
yeah,
Equity
for the
parent
stage.
union.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and so recently, SAG and ACTRA, well, I'm sorry, ACTRA, AFTRA, yeah,
AFTRA, AFTRA.
yeah, after they merged, and there's been some, there was a lot of controversy because some health benefits were dropped and that kind of thing. So, what are the pros and cons as an artist do you find with the union?
I think the union is very helpful, honestly. The union helps keep things on track. It helps you gain benefits, medical benefits. Without the union insurance, I would not, I would have to have paid out of pocket to, have my children and, any kind of medical situation I would have found myself in. So I think the union plays a very important role. Um, it probably could be improved in some way. I'm not as involved in it as I used to be. I had a very good friend who was the president of SAG in New York City, Mike Hodge, who passed away a couple of years ago. And I know he was very instrumental in getting a lot of good things done for actors in New York and across the board. But I think a union is good. It keeps things from going off the rails. It keeps there's safety issues that they tell the producers that they have to adhere to. Contractual things that are beneficial to the actors. So, I think the union plays an important role. And then, of course, there's pension. If you're in a union, you get a pension, and that's a wonderful thing. So yeah, I'm all for the union, for all of the unions.
And for younger actors just starting out, if you could give a little bit of advice in any field, in any way, whatever, what would you tell them?
um I would tell them to try and do the work as much as they can. If it's the stage, get involved in your community theater, get involved in your high school plays. Work as much as you can before you either come to New York, or if you're in New York, before you start seeking an agent, to really start honing your skills, your craft. Take it seriously, understand that it's a real profession and it's a real discipline. Um, and that you'll know if it's for you if you keep coming back, if you have the passion for it, if after every rejection that you may get, that you still come back and audition and, sign up for, auditioning if you don't have an agent. I was very lucky to get an agent very early on. I got an agent during Runaways, um, like I said, which was the first professional job. But just keep doing the work. Find a good acting teacher if you feel like that's something you want to do. Um, be authentic. Be When I work with young people, and I make them do things over and over again, they don't realize what it takes to be an actor. They don't realize what it takes to be a performer. And I would get, things like, well, we just did that. Why do we have to do it again? And, I would have to tell them, because this is what you do. You have to do it over and over again. I said, we might have done it 10 times today, but we're going to do it 20 times tomorrow. You know, you just have to do it until it's in your bones because I want you guys to be up there and feel confident with what you're doing. I want you to feel secure. So it's fun if it's your passion, but it ain't easy. I will tell you that. It is not easy. Um, but it's something that you would want to really dedicate the time and the effort into doing and sharing with other people. Yeah.
Well, I will link to some of the pages that I quoted from some of your roles below. Unless you have a website you want to send me in the email, I'll put that under there. I'll put both this and the early interview we did up with that information. It was a terrific interview. It was really nice to spend a couple of hours talking with you about it. So uh, continued success in whatever you're doing. It was very nice
Thank,
interview.
thank you so much, Dan. Thank you. It was really nice to meet you too. I really appreciate it.